Well, hello, and thank you for joining me today. Today, I am very excited to be joined by a friend and colleague, Dr. Amanda Adkins. And we're going to be talking today about plant-based diet and sort of plant-based diet specifically with attention to preventing, treating, and sometimes reversing chronic disease. So Dr. Adkins is a board-certified internal and lifestyle medicine physician practicing in the Bay Area, as well as a coach for people who are interested in incorporating plant-based diet into their life. Dr. Adkins, welcome, and thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you so much. I enjoy being here and talking with you always. So thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. Well, let's kick right off. And my first kind of question for you. So you and I are both MDs, right? We're both trained in Western medicine, and we have both been trained really in kind of the disease model of medicine and, how to use all these medications and, kind of this very, sort of formal sort of idea of health. So I'm really curious, what was your pathway to getting interested in lifestyle medicine and plant-based diet sort of in particular?
I get this question a lot because people are like you said, we
Because we're
learn
not
nothing about,
normal.
yeah. We don't learn about nutrition or anything like that, or preventing disease or anything. And I tell people I got into it for selfish reasons. I wanted to know for myself. I was an overweight teenager and have a lot of disease in my family, just like a lot of other African American families with high blood pressure, diabetes, high cholesterol, cancer, heart disease, all those top 10 causes of death in the US are in my family. And just at a young age, I was like, I don't want that to be my own story. And I knew I wanted to become a physician by the age of 12, but at the age of 16, I became a vegetarian. And it wasn't because I read something or learned something that I thought that was a great idea. I just wanted to lose weight. And so, yeah, so I was like,
And
sure, if I
it
cut
just
this
sounds
out, that
healthy,
makes,
right? Just
yeah,
vegetarian. Yeah.
yeah. But then I always give the caveat of I was the junk food vegetarian. So this was back in the 90s where vegetarianism was not as popular as it is today, at
Yeah.
least not in Indiana where I grew up. Maybe like where I am now in the Bay Area, they were doing it in the 90s, but not in Indiana. So that's where it started. And then I went on to become board certified in lifestyle medicine is because patients started asking, what can I do besides these medicines? I'm not going on these medicines. I'm not taking these medicines. These medicines are
Yeah.
causing me side effects.
Yeah.
So these are all the things I was hearing. So I was like, okay, let me see. And I can tell them no one told me about lifestyle medicine. I was just Googling things at the time. like I
How
came up
do
with
I help people in the real world who won't take medicine?
yeah, it was like homeopathic medicine. So I took a course in
Yeah.
that and I was like, this is not quite it. And then I was looking at functional medicine. I was like, ooh, that's a whole nother, ball game that was deep.
Yeah.
I was like, I don't know that my mind would take all that. But I definitely sent people to functional medicine. So and then because I was Googling all that, you know how the internet follows the stuff you search. And then all of a sudden lifestyle medicine came up and I was like, oh, what is this? And I was like, oh my gosh, this is it. This is what I've been looking for. So it kind of, like I said, kind of found me for my own selfish reasons, and then
Yeah.
trying to help patients more that didn't like the prescriptions that I was sending them that I learned about. Took all those years of medicine to learn
Yeah.
about. um, and this is how I am. The long of the short story.
Yeah, it's so, I mean, I think your story, highlights what many of us experience is that, we kind of go into medicine, very eager to serve patients and, wanting to really help them and, prevent things. And we really don't get a lot of training in conventional Western medicine on how to really prevent disease other than very simplistic and not always helpful messages of like, well, just eat less, just move more,
Mhm.
quit smoking, as though all of those things are just simple, straightforward, easy, and not
Right,
tied into so much of the rest of, all the difficult circumstances we face, all the stressors,
right.
all those kinds of things. So, yeah, I think I think it's funny when a lot of us are getting, so I'm board certified in obesity medicine, also for sort of selfish reasons. And, also for like, yeah, no, I want to learn more about this so that I can take care of me.
Yes.
Many of us are seeking, those
Mm-hmm.
answers because we haven't found it necessarily in our
Right.
medical training. So yeah, I'm right. I'm with you. And let's talk a little bit about, so yeah, vegetarian and vegan terms are pretty widely familiar to people these days, but plant-based diet isn't something that those aren't necessarily words that people have necessarily heard before. And so I'm curious, like, how would you describe that? And do you differentiate when you're talking about it with patients between plant-based diet and vegetarian or vegan?
Yes. So I always tell them what the difference is. And so I start out with vegetarianism because I tell them I was a vegetarian. They're like, okay, what's that? What's the difference with that? So you can eat, well, you can eat anything you want, but if you consider yourself a vegetarian, you don't eat any meat. And then when I say meat, I include fish, chicken, turkey, all that, because there's other, pescatarian, all that kind of
Yeah,
stuff.
little side
So
snacks. Yeah.
yes. So but you still would eat eggs and dairy, processed foods, all that kind of stuff with vegetarianism. Once you move to vegan, you cut out every single animal product. And this was enlightening to me more recently that honey, some, strict hard vegans still considered honey, because I was like, what's a bee? It's an insect. It's in the animal kingdom. So even that. So I was like, yes, you're right. I had to, really go back to my biology and think, okay, yes, that is true. But it's the way, they treat animals and things of the such. So there's some people that they tie veganism to animal rights. Some people don't. So they may also consider like wearing clothes or doing certain things that cause problems with animals that they would not use also. But if you strictly terms of the foods that you eat, no type of animal products at all. So no type of meat, no dairy, no eggs, no milk, nothing that may be involved with that, and no foods that put those categories of foods inside. For plant-based eating, it's you can have plant-based and you can have 100% whole food plant-based. So let me put that, because that's another thing too.
Yeah.
So because plant-based in itself, some people would say that they're plant-based, but they still may eat like seafood or fish or chicken or some animal products. Just sometimes maybe only like 1 to 10% of their food intake may still be animal products.
Yeah.
If you're 100% whole food plant-based, then you don't have any animal products at all. You don't have any processed foods. Some people don't even have oil either. So there's different ranges that you can go in, and there's different benefits with different categories that you actually may go, how deep you may go, how you may not. And you would be eating, and when we say whole food plant-based, I really tell people, that's your fruits, your vegetables, your nuts, your seeds, your legumes, and cutting out processed foods, basically.
Yeah. And I think it's a really important distinction because like I remember also growing up, kind of in the 80s and 90s, and vegetarianism was kind of around. I grew up in Seattle, right? West Coast based. But people often automatically assumed that vegetarian diet was healthy. And yet vegetarian diet could be mac and cheese and French fries. And vegan diet, Twinkies are vegan. Oreos are vegan.
Skittles.
Like there's lots of things that don't contain animal products but aren't healthy.
And especially now that we have that marketing, I tell people to look out for that.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, so I think that's really helpful to sort of explain plant-based, regardless of like kind of the strictness and whether you include animal products or not, is really looking at sort of real food that grows. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
And as minimally processed as possible. So that's where the benefits of eating that way comes from.
Yeah. And some science on the obesity medicine side with that too, showing that the more processed the food is, the more calories we get out of it, frankly, which leads to all sorts of other health problems that we would like to prevent.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. And Yeah, so that kind of leads to the next question. It makes sense, right, that fruits and vegetables would be healthier for us than, say like milkshakes and cheeseburgers. But tell us a little bit about kind of the benefits that you see them as a physician when it comes to plant-based diet around certain health conditions. So think about diabetes or high blood pressure, things that are really common in our clinical practices.
Yes. So diabetes, high blood pressure, high cholesterol, we call it the trifecta that then leads on to like stroke and heart attack.
Yeah.
So we really emphasize like plant-based eating with people that have high cholesterol and diabetes, with the cholesterol part of the meat that you get. So the dietary meat. So of course, yes, our body does make some cholesterol. You do need some cholesterol, but you don't have to necessarily take in a lot, eat a cholesterol.
Yeah.
Um,
Our bodies are
so
pretty
you
good about that.
Yes, our body are very, very good, very smart, smarter than we are, if we think. But so that's why we want to try to avoid that. It has usually a lot of saturated fats, high in sodium, which will also help with our blood pressure if we try to cut that out or minimize it as much as possible. And because of the way the food and drug industry is, I've been learning more that because of the way that they actually price food, that
Mhm.
you would think that chicken would be good because a lot of people like they know beef, red meat, they know is bad, heart disease,
Mhm.
that's been
Mhm.
spread a lot. But poultry has been injected with salt water to make it heavier. So
Mm.
therefore you may think, oh, chicken, it's skinless, it's boneless, it should be fine, but because of the way they actually prepare to bring it to you, it may be higher in sodium. So I really tell my people that have high blood pressure, you may look out for that. You have to especially look at if they have it on the label, how much sodium is in there,
Okay.
because we want to be low in sodium. If we can do that for high blood pressure, that's going to be very, very important. So we have labels on other foods. So for example, if you can't get something that's that you can just see out the ground, you don't have your own, look at the label.
Mhm.
And a dietitian told me a hint that if the calorie amount and the sodium amount, so say the calorie per serving is 200, you
Mhm.
want the sodium count to be under 200. So that way
Mm.
you can kind of tell if that's a high sodium food or a low sodium food without even seeing on
Interesting.
there.
Yeah.
So that's just a quick and easy glance. If you have to have some type of food that's minimally processed, you may look at that and see if that's really worth your while. And if you can eat more potassium rich food, so you have more of your fruits and vegetables that are higher in potassium. I always put the caveat in there, always talk with your physician, because if you have kidney issues, you have to look at that closer.
Yeah.
But if it's like purely high blood pressure, exchanging sodium for potassium rich foods, that would be better. The seasonings, the herbs and spices are very good. Also for diabetes, that people don't realize is the amount of saturated fat that they
Mhm.
take in.
Mhm.
And that certain meats, like the chicken and maybe even eggs, have been linked to diabetes because of that saturated fat. It got
Mm.
blocks the cell. So I don't know if you ever had this analogy, Dr. Mello, when you were in med school, how they always told us that insulin was the key that unlocked the door to open up the cell.
Yeah.
And they said, well, more of reading that if you have saturated fat, there's some gooky stuff inside that lock, so you can't
Oh,
get the
interesting.
key in the lock.
Mhm.
So you have to clear that out first, so your body can actually recognize its own insulin. So really cutting back on saturated fat will help with diabetes in the long run. So
Mhm.
most time people are like more protein with diabetics, and therefore they think that equals more meat, and therefore sometimes you get more fat in there. It may look like initially your blood sugars are dropping, but it doesn't necessarily become what we want to try to get to with lifestyle medicine, of like getting you off the lowest amount of medication or even
Yeah.
possibly reversing your diabetes. So that's
Yeah.
why we go a step further. And some, like, it's, I know it goes against what most people are taught, and they're like, what, when I say that? But I was like, just if you trust me, along the way, like this will definitely help in the long run. So
Yeah.
um, I know that was a whole lot.
No, I was going to say, I'm glad you mentioned that because I was not familiar with that association with saturated fat. And One thing I talk a lot about my patients with is insulin resistance, right? The state that happens before even pre-diabetes, where
Mhm.
insulin is circulating in high levels. It's trying to unlock and get into the cell. And what I'm hearing you say is that, when we have a lot of saturated fat, that's another reason why insulin resistance would stay high, because now we've got grease in the lock, basically,
Yes,
that's
yes,
gooping it up so the key can't work.
yes.
And so another
Yeah.
reason, right, that we need to consider, like, yeah, no, it's not simply about reducing carbohydrates as an end goal. It's like, no, we need to be mindful of, like, what kind of protein are we eating?
Yes,
What's the quality of the food, right, that's going
yes.
into us? So I've learned something already.
Yeah. I know that was eye-opening to me also.
Yeah.
But it's not just the fat that we eat, but also the fat that's around our midsection and the fat that's
Hmm.
around our organs. So
Hmm.
any extra fat that we eat that just goes on to store as fat, then that also causes problems too. So that's why we really, like I said, emphasize the
Yeah.
fat intake
Yeah.
also.
Yeah, yeah. And of course, as our body is coping with that high insulin level, that's also, right, cueing our body to retain fat, especially around the
Hmm.
midsection, which is it's kind of a cycle that feeds on
Yep,
itself.
that
Okay.
is.
All
That
right.
is.
All right. Plant-based diet it is. So, somebody might be, listening to us kind of talk about this, and, they might be a little bit curious, and they say, well, I've got some of those health conditions, or, those are conditions that I see in my family. And they're thinking, God, that seems like a lot of work, though. Where would you have people get started when they are sort of curious and interested in changing, but a whole big diet change just seems like too much to start with?
Yes. So I get this question a lot too, because most people are like deer in headlights when you say all these things. And I try to talk slower because sometimes when I get excited, I just start talking fast, and then people are just like, what are you saying?
Yeah.
So the most important thing I tell people to do first is add fruits and vegetables to every single meal. That's the simplest thing you can do to start with. And you don't have to change anything else
Yep.
initially.
Just
Just
throw more
add
fruits and
fruits and
veggies on there.
vegetables to every single meal. And you have a lot of fiber. Fiber is good for a lot of things in our gut health, which we know that the gut microbiome is definitely playing a big role in a lot of illnesses also that we are hearing about. But eating more fruits and vegetables. So if you can get it in at every single meal, that would be the first step. And once you have that down, you're like, I'm doing that. Then the next thing I tell people is then you are going to cut back on your meat. So if you are a person that eats a lot of meat, then you want to make the meat more of the side dish than the
Mm-hmm.
main dish.
Mm-hmm.
And any meats that you would want to like, I don't know if I'm going to cut out every single piece of meat. Then I would say
Yeah.
you want to cut out, especially the processed meats. Okay, so the bacon, the sausage, the bologna, the hot dogs. I tell people, they look
If
at
it
me and
gets extruded,
yeah.
we got to cut it down.
Yes. Like I understand what people love their bacon. I was like, I grew up on that, and everything, but
Yeah.
those will be the more harmful meats of any of them. So I would say next cut that out if you're not doing that. And then of course, like I said, make the meat the side dish instead of the main dish.
Yeah. And what are some of your favorite plant-based proteins that you would point people to if they're trying to kind of run that balance of, I've got more fruits and vegetables, I'm going to eat less meat, but I also was told to eat more protein and less
Mhm.
carbohydrates. What would you point people to?
So my favorite is lentils. You can actually make those very easily
Hmm.
because people are more. You can make a lot of things with that, and the taste is not so different.
Yeah.
Um, I tell people to try tempeh. That one
That's
is
a harder sell.
it is. So that's why when you said that, I was going to say tempeh, but I was like, no, let's do lentils. So lentils, like I said, you can do that first.
Yeah.
Tempeh and tofu are an acquired taste. So tofu is a more processed soybean.
Hmm.
Tempeh is less processed. You can almost see the bean, and then soybeans are the actual whole food. Okay, so just so people know how that kind of goes, but people probably heard of tofu, but tofu and tempeh, you can actually make it taste like whatever you want. It
Yeah.
tastes like nothing.
Yeah.
So adding in lots of herbs and spices, and there's so many different recipes out there. You can make tacos. I love Mexican food. You can
Yeah.
use that
Yeah.
a lot. So tofu tacos or tempeh tacos. You can actually make tempeh bacon for people that like bacon. You can
There
have
you
the
go.
different flavors that's added to there. I had to tell you this story. I did that once, and I took it to the office to eat. And everyone in the office knows that, I'm plant-based. I don't eat any meat at all. Never, I haven't since 16. And they were like, Dr. Atkins, what are you eating? They're like,
Sounds
because
like bacon.
they're like, it smells like meat. And I'm like, I know, right? So, but it was tempeh. So you can definitely fool a lot of people, a lot of meat eaters with
Yeah.
that. You can make bean burgers also, which can be simple, or you can make them more difficult if you like. I'm not a big cook, so I like to make things simple. Sometimes I'll try recipes, see how long it takes, and then kind of dibble and dabble that way. But
Go from there.
yeah,
No, I love the idea of lentil. I mean, we eat a lot of lentils in our house too, and hadn't really thought about, but you could also use cooked lentils kind of as a substitute anywhere you were going to use ground meat, right?
yes,
You could throw in some seasonings, and yeah, you could put it in tacos or,
mm-hmm.
taco
Sloppy
bowls or things
joes.
like that. Yeah, be really
We'll do that.
easy to get kind of the crumbly texture. It is not the same
Right.
as meat tastes. Let's not lie about that, and that's fine, but we adjust over time. And
Right.
yeah, and we can still have some of those favorite kind of meals with
Yes.
some of these substitutes, even if somebody was doing, so let's say half ground beef and lentils, like half lentils as a way to adjust.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
And that, like I said, decreasing their meat, that's definitely possible.
Yeah.
Since you mentioned substitutes, I just want to
Yeah.
throw this in there because we
Sure.
have a lot of meat substitutes that are out there.
Yeah,
So,
Impossible Burgers and all the
yes.
like.
So, some people ask me, and I was like, yes, I do eat those because that's a actual easier sell. Like you can grab that and go,
Yeah.
and use that more as a transition from you
Mm-hmm.
eating meat if you want to do the substitutes. But I still tell people that the biggest benefit is going to be from eating the whole food. So the plant-based burgers that they sell now, they're highly processed. Back in the day, they had the actual veggie burger
There
where
were
the
the
vegetables, you
garden
can see
burgers
it.
of the 90s.
Those are my favorite, but I guess that was not translating over to the meat population, so
Right.
it wasn't selling
Right.
the
It
other
doesn't
the other
taste like
side.
meat.
Right.
Yeah,
So
and
they changed to what they have now.
yeah.
And like I said, people, you can do that at times if you're like you're out to eat or something like that, or if need to grab and go. But don't make that your mainstay all the time. So that's, like I said, those are the highly processed foods,
Yeah.
which is going to be like high in sodium, high in fat. So you still have to be very careful with those. So I always like to
Yeah.
put that caveat
And
in
I'm so
also.
glad you mentioned that because yeah, like it may overall be a better choice if we kind of look at the numbers on the package, maybe, but there's a lot of fillers, there's a lot of stuff in there that's binding it and trying to make it look and taste more like meat that is very, very processed. And the
Yes.
more processed our foods are, the farther we get away from real food, often, the more consequences we're often
Right.
facing, right?
Yeah.
Whether that's looking at blood pressure or weight or any of those,
Yeah.
kind of important characteristics. So I'm
Yeah,
glad
your
you
body
mentioned.
can't recognize it, so it usually stores it as fat. It's just like, oh, I'll
Yeah,
just put it over here. Maybe
we'll
I'll
just
need it later.
we'll just carry it with us.
Yeah.
Yeah. And yeah, so and just coming back to something that you mentioned, because I think a lot of people in your boat, they're just not big cooks, right? And we have a lot of different options these days in terms of being able to have, foods kind of conveniently to us. A lot of people say, I just don't like to cook. And, I'm just used to eating this restaurant food or this takeout all the time. And, the vegetarian option doesn't look good. For somebody who doesn't cook much or doesn't know how to cook, how do you help them sort of get started? What would you recommend to them?
So usually when people say they don't know how to cook, there's a few things that they may cook. So I always tell people you want to have just a few simple recipes in your, repertoire. So I would say my go-to is lentils, roasted Brussels sprouts, and like
Mm,
sauteed kale or just steamed kale or something like that. or you can eat just the raw veggies, something to grab easily. You can try recipes initially, just like one day, just try a few and see which ones you may like. If it's more than 10 ingredients and 10 steps, I may do that once, and then I'm finding another way to get this meal done. So
Yeah.
I'm just letting y'all know, I don't like to cook either.
Yeah.
And there are people that absolutely have, like they say, zero time to cook. They're not going to do it at all. There are a lot of now plant-based meal delivery services that you can use. So I would start recommending to my patients, there's like thistle.co. There was another one I just saw on Facebook, and they're like purely plant-based that you
Daily
can look.
Harvest, I think, has a lot of plant-based foods.
They may have one. The other one is leaving me. I had another one, but that thistle.co was the one that I remember, and I actually recommended to some patients. And a lot of people may look at those and think, oh, it's expensive. But I was like, usually you exchange your grocery money for that, and then also the convenience of having it. And if you really want to go deep in, I tell people you can always get a personal chef. Like there's people out there now that's their job. It's like some of these restaurants that shut down. Are even some people that are coming up in the business that may like have food trucks. They may do like personal chef on the side where they can just prepare your meals and bring them to you. So, and then you can definitely control what's in there. So it's just, how much that you want to do, whether you want to exchange your time for money. And sometimes you have to do that. Or if you're a person that doesn't like to grocery shop and cook, because that was a big thing for me. Like, oh, I got to go to the grocery store. And I never cook the same day I go to the grocery store. Like it's too much work.
It's too much.
So you can have, those grocery stores now, since COVID, a lot of them will deliver to you and for a very low or no price. So you can do that too, to have that as an option. So there's so many different things that you can do if you don't cook, that you don't have to resort to going through the drive-through and ordering through a clown head or something like that. And then even at some of those places, you can actually look at their menu ahead of time. I do this a lot if I go out with friends and know what you can order. And my husband also taught me this: just because they have a menu doesn't mean you can't order what you want.
That's true too.
He uses the menu as a suggestion and then tells them what he wants them to make. So if you have a kitchen, you can tell them, I don't want any oil added to my, broccoli. I don't want any butter added.
Butter on it.
So you can do a lot. You can do a lot there. They're usually a bit more flexible unless they have a set menu. But if you go to a restaurant that has a kitchen, be very nice to the waiter and say, this is what I need. This is the type of food that I take in, but I want to be here social with my friends. Can the chef make me this? Then leave them a nice tip. Then you visit that restaurant frequently. They'll be waiting for you.
There's ways to make this work for us. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I love sort of being able to think about people. Because a lot of people might hear us, and think, oh goodness, this means I'm going to be stuck in the kitchen for hours. This means I'm going to have to do all this work and chop all these things. And it's like, no, let's find out ways to make it easy. So we've got meal kits that we can order. We've got more options of sort of prepared food that comes to us, right? Like thistle and some of these things where we don't have to do anything to it. We just put it in the fridge. We've got a lot more places that are offering chopped up veggies and, things that are kind of easy and ready to go. Frozen vegetables are often minimally processed. They usually don't have any stuff on them. They're picked fresh and not too expensive. So lots of options. We just might have to think about food differently is
exactly. Once you know of other places, you'll be like, because most of the time now when I see fast food, I don't see it. Like I just go past. I'm like, that's not even what I would be looking for at this time. But if you have like a Whole Foods or a Sprouts or something like that near you, also they usually have like a hot bar and fresh things that people can go to, and you can have that. So I tell people you can do half and half. You can go get half of your meal already fixed and cook half at home. It's
lots of proteins that are there, proteins that are ready to go, right? So you can grab some veggies, you can grab some proteins. Certainly they do usually have, at least at ours, they've got the mac and cheese and they've got all the
they do. You can skip
all the heavy
those.
Stuff. We can skip those, right? But lots of different options to try and make this easier for us. And yeah, sometimes it costs a little bit more, right, than your bag of chips or your drive-through meal. But we're spending less money on medications, right? We're having better energy, right? We're better able to do the things that we want to do.
Yes, exactly. You
So
live
thinking about those
longer. You
costs,
see
right?
you see me and Dr. Mello less.
Right.
Yes.
You're like, no, I'm good with a checkup once a year because
Yeah,
everything's under control. Yeah.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
Perfect. Perfect. We'll wish you well. Very good. Well, tell us a little bit about the work that you do outside of your clinical practice, because I know that you also have this interest in bringing more of this work to, clients who are not patients of yours, but people who are interested in incorporating more plant-based. Where can people find you? Tell us a little bit about that work.
Yes, so my website is www.dramandamd.com. So like dramandamd.com. I'm also on social media, Facebook and Instagram at Dr. Amanda Adkins, and my last name is spelled Adkins. So my focus is mostly on Christian women of color that are overweight and have high blood pressure or diabetes, and looking to make lifestyle changes. They're tired of the medications they may be on, or trying to hold off being on medications. And we really work through a lot of nutrition. Some of my clients, they are plant-based, but they're not the 100% like we were talking about before. Some may be like that 80-90, and they're still getting great results, losing weight, the blood pressure coming down, blood sugars and things of the such. And it's just because I started to do that because we don't have time in our regular practice to really dive deep into some of the things that we just discussed today. Like I can ramble them off real quick and then walk out the door,
Right.
but then don't have time to
You're
answer
like, what?
questions, right, about anything else.
Yeah.
And then, see them 3 or 6 months later, then they're like, yeah, I forgot about that. But with the coaching, we meet every week trying to see what worked for you, what didn't, what can we change, what can we tweak. And then even after the nutrition piece, because I learned a lot with lifestyle medicine, there's 5 other pillars that we work with new exercise, sleep, stress, social relationships, and substance abuse, tobacco use, things of the such. So if someone has issues with that, we kind of touch bases on all those things, because we want you to be, your whole lifestyle is, whole, that you're living well into your 90s, even the hundreds, where you're able to still climb mountains and, travel. You're not just stuck at home looking at someone. Like if you want to travel, across the seas, you can still do that, and not like, I'm going to be a burden to someone. They're going to be like trying to keep up with you. That's my goal anyway. Like,
Yeah.
what are
Yeah.
you doing?
We'll be little old ladies in our little sneakers and our walkers run out pacing everybody else.
Right. Yeah. We'll be those people on social media. They're like, oh my gosh, she ran a marathon at 99,
I think that's so great. So what I'm hearing is, and I'll put links to all your information for people to find you, but it's really a closer handhold for people who know they want to make changes. They've been told perhaps that they should make changes, and they just kind of need more hand holding in terms of like, what do I actually do? How do I actually make this work? How do I address the stress and things that kind of get in the way of my eating? And doing things in a way that, yes, we aren't usually able to do in our medical practices because of the way the insurance companies are structured in American healthcare. So I love that. And I'm sure that, people who come to you really benefit from having your knowledge and your expertise to be able to really understand, like, what does this look like? How do I actually make these changes in my life? So I'm so glad that you're doing that. I think it's really powerful work.
Thank you. Thank you. I love it too. It's so inspiring to hear the people's stories afterwards, because it's just like, oh, this is what you want to see, people just come alive and like, oh, I'm able to do all these things now.
Yeah. And realizing how they felt before and how much different they feel now.
Yes.
It's pretty
like I don't know, I feel bad till I felt better.
Right. Very good. Well, Dr. Adkins, thank you so much for joining me here today. I think this conversation is really going to be helpful for people who are kind of curious about, the lifestyle changes they need to make. They don't know exactly where to get started. I think you've given some really powerful ideas. So I'm so glad we got to chat today.
Well, thank you. I'm so glad too. So hopefully everyone, this helped you. So leave us comments, let us know.
Yeah, please do. All right, everyone, that's what we have for today. Thank you so much. And as she said, please leave us comments and please share and please go follow Dr. Adkins. You'll see all her links below. All right, take care.